Let's continue our discussion regarding the environmental science in lecture 14, 15, and 16, particularly climate change, global warming, and environmental laws and regulation. So, these are our learning outcomes. So, at the end of this discussion, you are expected to identify all the environmental laws and regulation and develop an in-depth understanding in following its rules. Second is analyze the global impact of climate change and of course to generate innovative practices and solutions in reducing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And lastly, reflect critically on the causes of climate change and see how human activities affect the climate change. So, before anything else, let's talk about what is climate. So, traditionally, climate has been defined as the weather or the average weather, temperature, precipitation, cloudiness, and how these variables change throughout the year. So, for many terms, climate refers to a long-term weather statistics. So, generally, if we are pertaining to the weather, we are pertaining to the temperature on how um, cold our environment is, on how hot our environmental is. Okay, of course, we have here precipitation, kung lalakas bang ulan or hindi, the presence of clouds as well, and of course, yung presence of clouds kasi, it blocks the amount of sunlight that penetrates uh, our earth or the earth. Now, if it's blocked the sunlight, then the amount of sunlight penetrating the earth would be decline. Okay, would decline. And of course, hindi masyadong magkakaroon ng araw. Okay, so for more broadly and more accurate definition of climate is a system of consisting of the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. So physical, chemical, and biological processes are involved in the interactions among the components of the climate system, as well as vegetation, soil moisture, and glaciers, for examples, are much part of the climate system as are temperature and precipitation. Okay, so those mentioned terms are factors of how climate is uh, being defined. Okay, so the oceans strongly influence Earth's present climate. So the oceans drive the atmospheric circulation by heating the atmosphere, mostly in the tropical regions, okay, or in the tropics. So most of the sunlight absorbed by the Earth is absorbed at the top of the tropical oceans, and the atmosphere does not absorb much sunlight. It's too transparent, di ba? The oceans absorb 98% of the solar radiation when the sun is high in the sky. So take note that the oceans play a significant role in controlling the amount of sunlight or the temperature that enters the planet. Okay, the Earth absorbs top of the absorb great amount of sunlight, di ba? So it is almost 98% of the solar radiation. Now, the oceans strongly influence Earth's present climate by the oceans loses heat by evaporation. So think of these as ocean sweating, because of course, when there is uh, when there is when heat is being loose, parang ganoon. Of course, made-decline yung evaporation. Kasi walang masyadong init eh. Kasi ang init kasi, it's a factor for evaporation. Now, ang evaporation, it is significant for precipitation. Now, trade winds carry the evaporated water vapor to the intertropical convergence zone where it condenses as rains. So, itong trade winds na ito, um, due to the evaporation of water or the water vapor, itong water vapor na to is nadadala ng mga trade winds that this cause the ITCZ or the Intertropical Convergence Zone wherein yung natatamaan ng intertropical convergence zone is masyado ng maulan because these water vapors condenses and it becomes rain already. So the oceans also loses heat by sending out infrared radiation. So the infrared radiation is absorbed by water vapor in the tropical atmosphere. So the wind drives ocean current and together they carry heat from tropics to the polar region. So uh, uh, that is true. As this heat travels to the polar region, nagde-decrease na yung heat niya, 'di ba? Ito yung parang tinatawag nating uh, exothermic reaction. Now, let's talk about the carbon dioxide problems and other greenhouse gases. So take note that carbon dioxide problem can be stated relatively simply. First, more than 6.5 million people turn fuel to keep warm, to provide electricity, to light their homes, and to run industry, and to move about using cars, buses, boats, trains, and as well as airplanes. Now, these um, mentioned technologies are some technologies that produce carbon dioxide. So the burning of fossil fuels produces carbon dioxide, which is released to the atmosphere. So the burning of fossil adds 6 gigatons of carbon to the atmosphere each year. Imagine gigatons or gigatons, 6 gigatons of carbon. So carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere have risen about 270 parts per million before the industrial age to about 380 part million by 2006. So imagine 41% increase over pre-industrial values and 31 increased since 1870. Imagine how carbon dioxides are accumulated um, each year. O, di ba? Ang taas-taas ng percentage na. Now, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas and the increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere must influence the Earth's radiation balance. Di ba? Kasi, of course, if there is a presence of carbon dioxide, it will affect the solar radiation. Di ba? So, it actually factor for climate change. Di ba? For global warming. So other greenhouse gases includes, of course, water vapor. So this is by far the most important greenhouse gas because it evaporates mostly from the ocean and it causes Earth's surface to about 30 degrees Celsius warmer. So out of 33 degrees Celsius of warming caused by all greenhouse gases combined. So imagine, so it just maintain 30 degrees Celsius warmer. It keeps our Earth warm. Kasi kapag masyadong mainit or masyadong malamig ang ating Earth, of course, maraming organisms na hindi magsa-survive. Now, kapag naman masyadong mainit, of course, madami ding organisms na hindi magsa-survive. So, of course, kapag nag-increase na yan, halimbawa kapag naging 33 degrees Celsius na yan, okay, that is already caused by greenhouse gases. It's the combination of greenhouse gases that is present in the air. Okay, so other greenhouse gases includes methane. So it is produced by bacteria in wetlands and bogs, castle, rice paddies, termites, landfills, and coal mining. So methane or tawag nito, flammable gas. So, katulad nga ng iba na napapabalita, bakit kaya yung mga ibang locations dito sa Earth, kapag sinindihan mo yung nagugulat yung mga tao na kapag yung lupa sinindihan mo is may umaapoy. It's because of the presence of methane, because methane are flammable. So, that could be produced by the bacteria, uh, and yung byproduct nila is nagkakaroon ng gaseous content na ito yung tinatawag na methane, di ba? About two-thirds of the emission into the atmosphere comes from human activity, mostly the northern hemisphere. So, take a look at this. Flammable ice bubbles. So, frozen bubbles of methane trapped beneath the Alberta's Lake Abraham. So, paano nangyari? Paano nagkaroon ng methane dyan? It's because of the microorganisms that is, of course, are present sa loob ng oceans. Okay? Methane does not remain long in the atmosphere. About 8 years, so the emission and sinks are already close to balance. So they are at least they could be regulated. Methane could be regulated kasi nga methane are very useful in, of course, heating our in heating and creating heat, in of course sa energy if energy utilization. Okay, di ba? Now we also have here the nitrous oxide. So nitrous oxide comes from microbes in the soil and the oceans, and from burning fossil fuels at high temperatures such as car engine. So, about one third of the emission into the atmosphere comes from human activity. So, nitrous oxide concentrations were 319 parts per billion in 2004, which was 18% larger than the pre-industrial concentration. So, its lifetime, in the atmosphere is similar to the carbon dioxide about century. So, nitrous oxides cannot be, parang hindi siya masyadong na-degrade. Thus, nag-accumulate lang siya sa atmosphere. That could actually be, kapag nag-combine siya sa other gases, it could actually create what they call this greenhouse gases. And of course, these greenhouse gases could actually cause of global warming. We also have here the halocarbons or the presence, of course, the halocarbons, uh, the other terms are the common chlorofluorocarbons or other compounds in which the hydrogen of a hydrocarbon is replaced by halogens. So examples are refrigerant used in air conditioners. So itong chlorofluorocarbons are used by some appliances. Now, kapag itong chlorofluorocarbon na to nag-emit, of course, na-emit siya sa air, this could actually be combined sa other gases and nagiging greenhouse gases siya. Now we have tropospheric ozone. So it is produced by smog. Ano nga ba yung smog? Okay, it's basically the concentration or the mix. It's a mixture of smoke and fog. So kung makikita nyo, uh, it is a bad what do you call this? It is a bad concentration of the air because it traps heat, di ba? Ozone is at least concentrated in the ground layer or the other term, planetary boundary layer of the troposphere. So the ground level or the tropospheric ozone is created by chemical reactions between oxides of the nitrogen and the volatile organic compound. So ito yung parang itong ground level zero or ground level tropospheric ozone is ito yung nakakatakot at makakasira siya sa health because kasi nga there is a present uh, there are gases na present doon and ito ang tinatawag na nitrogen oxide. And kapag itong nitrogen oxide na to, nag-mix siya together with other volatile organic compounds, it could actually result to health, some serious health issues. Okay? So, now the question here is how do greenhouse gases influence Earth's surface temperature? First, energy from the sun beats down on the Earth. Now, some energy is reflected into the space and the rest enters the atmosphere. So, kung makikita ninyo, uh, the sun the sun rays penetrates the Earth's surface and yung number 2 merong nagba-bounce back or nagre-reflect. Okay? The Earth absorbs the energy and it emits heat already. So unlike the other gases, greenhouse gases absorbs and emit the heat energy. Some is emitted into space and some are emitted back into the Earth. So kung makikita nito ng number 4, okay, some are emitted and some are going back to the Earth. So the heat is effectively trapped and warms the Earth. So kapag halimbawa, hindi na-trap yung heat is na-release lang siya mismo dito sa outer space, ano mangyayari? Of course, hindi na mare-regulate yung temperature ng ating Earth. Maraming maaring um, pwedeng mangyari. Okay? So, take a look at this. Most, some solar radiation is reflected by the Earth and the atmosphere. Okay, some of the infrared radiation passes through the atmosphere, and some is absorbed and emitted in all directions of the greenhouse gas molecules. So the effect of this is to warm the Earth's surface and the lowest atmosphere. Okay, so yun yung goal. Now, ang greenhouse gas kasi it's very helpful to warm the Earth. Kasi kapag hindi warm ang Earth, of course, maraming mga phenomena ang mangyayari, right? So, maraming mga mamatay na mga microorganisms kasi ang mga ibang microorganisms nakarely sila sa mataas na temperature para makapag-survive, di ba? So, now let's talk about the global warming and evidences of the climate change. First, glaciers are melting. It's because of what? Global warming. Next, sea levels are rising. It's because of what? Melting of melting of glaciers, 'di ba? And of course, um, yung mga ibang reports is that nagsisink na din talaga yung tectonic plates, okay? It's because of the movement of tectonic plates at maaring halimbawa sa Indonesia, sa Jakarta, Indonesia, maaring lumubog yon with at least uh, maybe 20 years later. Okay? Cloud forests are dying. That is true. Forests still cover up 30% of world lands and they are disappearing at alarming rate. It's because of human activity. Wildlife is scrambling to keep pace. Take a look at that. Take a look at this uh, polar bear, di ba? It's so sad na nakikita siyang napakakaunti na lang ang kanyang habitat, di ba? Imagine, uh, that is an indication that there is really a need to uh, save, to create a movement to at least protect our environment. So take a look at this. This is an evidence of the climate change based on a graph. So this graph is based on a comparison of atmospheric samples contained in ice cores and more recent direct measurement provides evidence that atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased since industrial revolution. So, ang industrial revolution kasi 'di ba, ito yung pag-boom ng mga industry such as factories in creating different appliances that these appliances and other technologies causes greenhouse they create or they emit carbon dioxide that are source of the accumulation of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, di ba? Take a look. So, the current level of the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is about, of course, 420 uh, parts per million. Imagine, that's very high, di ba? So, the current warming trend is on particular significance because most of it's extremely likely to be a result of human activity since the mid 20th century and proceeding at the rate that is unprecedented over decades to millennia, di ba? So, it's all about the human activity, di ba? So, now, um, One of the very good example of the evidence of climate change is the global temperature rise. So take note, class, that according to a research published um, in the internet, parang each year nag-increase ang temperature natin for almost 1 degree Celsius. Di ba? Imagine kung umabot tayo ng 2020, kung umabot tayo ng 2030, kung halimbawa ang average temperature ng air natin, ng ating planet is 42 kapag 2023 ngayon, and then kung umabot ng 2030, madadagdagan ng 7. Di ba? Imagine kung gaano nakainit ang ating planeta. Of course, warming oceans. So, bakit ba nagiging warm na yung oceans? So, the oceans have absorbed much of the increased heat, and with the top of 70 meters, the oceans showing warming of more than 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit 6 since 1969. So, kapag nag-warm yung ocean, ano nangyayari? Of course, kapag nag-warm yung ocean, mataas yung possibility na melt yung mga glaciers natin. And of course, maraming mga biodiversity or mga environment ang makaapektuhan yan sa mga, particularly the marine environment. Kasi yung mga isda, of course, ang isa sa indicator nila, ang isa sa ginagawa kasi ng mga isda is of course yung temperature is basis nila yan para makapag-produce ng marami. Na kapag halimbawa tumataas yung temperature ng oceans, maaaring nakakapag-adapt yung ibang mga animals, but the other animals may not adapt that kind of environment and they could die. Okay? Next is the shrinking ice sheets. So the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets have decreased in mass. So data from NASA's Gravity Recovery and Climate experiment shows Greenland lost an average of 286 billion tons of ice per year between 1993 and 2016. So while Antarctica lost about 127 billion tons of ice per year during the same time period. So imagine kapag nag-accumulate lahat ng data regarding all the glaciers na nami-melt, yung mga ice sheets natin, napakalaki, di ba? Di ba? Napakalaki ng impact niya sa ating environment. So the rate of Antarctica's ice mass lost has tripled in last decade. So itong tripled na to, it could be multiplied ulit by 3. Okay, di ba? So baka mamaya hindi lang yan maging triple, di ba? Tapos mag-multiply pa yan sa mas higher quantities, di ba? So next is the glacier retreat. Glacier retreating almost everywhere around the world, including the Alps, Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, Alaska, and Africa. So ano nga ba yung glacial retreats? Ito yung ang glacial retreats is ito yung pag-melt ng ice dun sa tops ng sa taas ng mga bundok natin. Now, kapag nag-melt ang ice doon, of course, that is an evidence of climate change. Next is, of course, decreased snow cover. Diba? Satellite observations reveal that the amount of the spring snow cover in the northern hemisphere has decreased over the last 5 decades, that the snow is melting earlier. Next, sea level rise. Diba? Global sea levels rose about 8 inches last century. Imagine. So, 8 inches, gano'n ba kalaki yun? So, ang laki ng impact nun sa ating planeta. So, the rate in last 2 decades, however, is nearly double that of last century, and it is accelerating slightly every year. So, the Republic of Maldives are vulnerable to the sea level rise. Kasi yung Maldives kasi parang isang maliit lang siyang country wherein kapag patuloy ang pag-rise ng oceans, maaaring ang countering ito is mag-disappear in the near future. Next, declining Arctic sea ice. Take a look at this. So, yung puro lahat melting and melting of ice. So, both the extent and thickness of the Arctic sea ice has declined rapidly over the last several decades. So take a look. Yung red, what they call orange line, dito dati yung ice. But now, ang laki ng nabawas. Ang laki ng nabawas dun sa ating ice glacier, di ba? Next, extreme events. Extreme lahat ng mga disasters, lahat ng typhoons, di ba? Imagine, nagkakaroon ng signal number 5. For the second year in a row, the world's strongest typhoon barreled through the Philippines, the Yolanda, following the footsteps of Pablo, aka Poba, in 2012. So, sino ba naman ang hindi makakalimot sa Yolanda na ang daming namatay? Imagine yung isang barko na punta sa taas ng land, di ba? At so, the Yolanda is a destructive storm deviated from a usual path taken by typhoons. So, excuse me. So, Sendong is also one in December 2012, and of course, uh, Sendong is one of the remarkable um, disaster na nangyari sa ating sa Pilipinas, di ba? Next, ocean acidification. So, kapag naging acidic yung ocean, ano mangyayari? Maraming organisms ang mamamatay. Okay? So, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution led to the acidity of the surface ocean water wherein nag-increase siya ng 30%. So, this increase is a result of human emitting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and hence being absorbed into the ocean. So, the amount of the carbon dioxide absorbed by the upper layer of the oceans is increasing about 2 billion pounds per year. Imagine, ang daming mga nangyayari. It's because of, ang daming mga factors, ang daming mga indications ng climate change. Now, ano nang mangyayari? As a student, what will you do? What will you do to protect our ocean? What will you do to protect our land? What will you do to protect our environment? Okay. Now, of course, talking about that, there are some regulations or environmental laws that is being implemented sa atin. Now, let's talk about the different laws passed in the country that protects our environment as well as, of course, the biosphere. We have here the RA 8749 or the Clean Air Act of 1999. We have here the R8 9275, the Philippine Decree 1586, the RA 96969, RA 9003, and RA 9512. Now let's talk about the Clean Air Act. So the Clean Air Act or the RA 8749 is an act providing for a comprehensive air pollution control policy for other purposes. So I'd like you to read this using this PDF file nandito. Okay? Papasa ko sa inyo to later on. So, ano nga bang sinasabi nito? Okay? Ano nga bang sinasabi ng Clean Air Act? So, the state shall protect and advance the right of the people to balance the healthy ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of the nature. The state shall promote and protect the global, di ba? We are all responsible in protecting and promoting global environment sustainability, and while recognizing the primary responsibility of the local government unit to deal with environmental problems. So we need to abide laws as citizens of this country. So the state recognized the responsibility of cleaning the habitat and environment is in primarily area-based. Okay? So, parang ito yung mga halimbawa, mga projects ng ating community na tapat ko, linis ko, mga ganun. So, the state also recognized the principle of polluter must pay. So, kapag halimbawa, di ba, kapag nagsunog ka ng basura, first offense, third offense, or first offense, second offense, and third offense, magko-community service ka or magbabayad ka or magmumulta ka ng malaking halaga. So, the state shall recognize that the clean and healthy environment is for the good of all and should therefore be concern of all. So that is true because we all are dependent in our environment, di ba? Next is the Philippine Clean Water Act. So this is an act providing a comprehensive water quality management and for other purposes. Now let's talk about the environmental laws about, of course, the Philippine Clean Water Act. So discharging or disposing any water pollutant to water body or such which will impede natural flow in water is, of course, prohibited. Discharging, injecting, or allowing to enter into the soil anything that would pollute groundwater is prohibited. Operating facilities that discharge regulated water pollutant without valid required permits are prohibited. And of course, disposal of potential infectious medical waste in the sea by vessels are also prohibited. Unauthorized transport of dumping into the water of sewage sludge of solid waste are also prohibited. And of course, transport, dumping, or discharge of prohibited chemical substances or pollutant listed under toxic chemicals, hazardous, and nuclear substances are prohibited. So anyone who commits prohibited acts such as discharging untreated water waste into water body will be fined for every day of violation, and the amount not less than 10,000 pesos but not more than 200,000 pesos. So kapag halimbawa nakakita kayo ng mga taong ginawa ang lahat ng bagay na yan, maaari ninyo silang picturean at i-report sa kinauukulan. Okay? Next, we also have the Presidential Decree number 1586, which is Environmental Impact Statement System. So this is, of course, it is declared environmentally critical project that and areas are required to obtain an environmental compliance certificate before operation. So that's why, if napapansin nyo sa mga business industries natin, meron silang mga environmental compliance certificate. So environmental critics projects includes heavy industries, resource and extractive industry, infrastructure project, and golf course projects. So lahat ng mga business industries dapat may mga certificate. Okay? So, of course, kapag halimbawa kasi hindi sila nagpasa or hindi sila wala silang ganitong klaseng certificate, they could be fined. Okay? Violators shall be punished by suspension or cancellation of their permit certificate or fine of each violation. Diba? Next, we also have here the RA 6969 or the Toxic Substances and Hazardous Waste Control Act. So, to keep an inventory of the chemicals that are presently being imported, manufactured, or used, indicating among others and their existing possible uses, test data, names of firms manufacturing or using them, or such other informations as may be considered relevant to the protection of the health and the environment. So, ito involved dito yung mga, like for example, yung mga hospitals na of course, nagtatapan ng mga basura kung saan-saan, maaari silang mapatawan ng parusa. Okay? So, to monitor and these, of course, these law is, of course, to monitor and regulate the importation, manufacture, processing, handling, storage, transportation, sale, distribution, use, and disposal of chemical substances and mixtures that present unreasonable risk or injury to health and to environment in accordance with national policies and their international commitment. And of course, this is to inform and to educate the populace regarding the hazard and risk attendant to the manufacture, handling, storage, and transportation, processing, distribution, use, and disposal of the toxic chemicals and other substances and mixture. And of course, to prevent the entry and even the transit or as well as the keeping of storage and disposal of the hazardous and nuclear waste into the country for whatever purpose. So, if we are talking about the Toxic Substances and Hazardous Waste Control Act, we are pertaining to the RA 6969. Now, let's move on to the Solid Waste Management Act. Lahat alam nito, okay? The RA 9003. So, the RA 9003 or Ecological Waste Solid Waste Management Act is of course in this act is of course to regulate how solid waste management. Okay, so I want you to search on this na muna. Okay, and of course, dito meron din tayong tinatawag na RA 9512 or an act to promote environmental awareness through education or environmental education and other purposes. So itong ginagawa natin ngayon na pagbibigay ng uh, itong environmental science or itong yes is one of the scope of this law. Okay, wherein the higher education institution, particularly the Commission on Higher Education, mandates every state, universities, and colleges to offer environmental science subject to at least make aware to educate people that we should care our environment. And of course, kapag meron tayong care sa ating environment, we know all, we know every aspect about our environment, we have the power to make change. And kapag nagtulong-tulong tayo, sabi nga nila, our micro effort will make a macro effect in protecting and saving our mother earth. So that is the end of the lecture. I want you guys to rate this na lang and thank you very much for listening.